Start recording and record.
Awkward.
Hey, this is Gilbert F. with the Unnamed Game Co.
This is Jordan G. with Zone Fighter Games.
Welcome back to our lovely podcast. It is the third week of May when this all goes out.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we will be talking about how to find a game group or group of people. We're going to try to do this in a sort of a Lord of the Rings style, the Fellowship of the Ring, where you will create, we will try to create our ideal game group. Well, that would be pretty awesome if we could just be like, we shall pick you, you will be part of our group, and we shall be one with the ring. One with the ring.
One ring, speaking of, might even be a good way to get people to play. Cause with Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, it's a good way to kind of like trick people into learning to play. Because with like Stranger Things and Critical Role and all the other like stuff that's demystifying RPGs for people at large, some people are curious now and just being like, hey, I'm putting the game together, you mentioned it that you wanted to try, do you want to come? Like maybe just asking your friends and putting something together, because if they're curious, and even if you maybe get like a couple hours into it and they're all having a good time, maybe ask them to keep going and see what happens.
Yeah.
That's number one way to find a group is reach out to people you already know.
Yep. And one of the things is just a reminder, if you're a GM, you're pretty much just trying to create Stockholm Syndrome. Isn't it true? You get a bunch of people, you kind of hold them hostage with your game, and then eventually they feel sympathy for everything, and then they're like, we just want to stay around because we understand how great this is.
Yeah.
Stockholm Syndrome.
You have to trick them with a cute goblin named Bobbler.
Yeah, you're all just like, oh, well, he introduced unicorns.
Yeah.
Great.
So, that's usually the best way is just see who that's already interested. Like that's how I put like, a couple groups of mine together is I just put up like an open thing on like any of my social media, like Facebook or something, and just be like, hey, does anyone want to play an RPG on this day? And I'll routinely get like 7 people and 4 show up. Like, that's fine.
I think that's also a rule of thumb. You need to get more committed than slots you have generally. Because like TTRPG folks flake on you.
Yeah, that's a pretty normal thing. Like my first actual game group, like I think I spiked up into like 8 people at one point, and then like once or twice, I think it's like we did like two more sessions, and then like people just stopped showing up, so like it dropped down to like 5, and then like that 5th player was like, hey, this was a lot of fun, but like I got a new job, I can't show up anymore. Just want to thank you for allowing me to play. Like, which is not like decorum or like anything like that. I think that's just polite, is to be like, hey, that was cool, I unfortunately can't make it anymore, please continue to have fun.
Yeah. It was a fun. We had fun, didn't we? Yes, we did. Cool. And a lot of times you lose. Life happens. We lose players all the time in games. If you can get a group that can last for even like 6 months, you've been blessed. Because like with no turnovers, no changes, like that's godsend. Because like that's what we fight for. It's where your schedules align, and if you can have consistent games every week, in perpetuity for 6 months, that's amazing. It's so hard to do these days. The group I've been in is, knock on wood, luckily have been together for 6 months. No, yeah, almost 6 months. And at this stage, we've all just sort of said, Thursday night, we are unavailable.
Yeah, that's reminds that too. We do have a standing rule that if something's gonna happen on like a Thursday or a Sunday, because we try to because we have 2 different games, or we have 3 different games running. We alternate on Thursdays, and then Sunday is this one game. We try to be like, hey, I can't make it. Like, here's the reason why my character is gone.
Yeah. We've maybe been down one person at a time. We've never missed 2 people at one time. It's been great. It's been a great group to have. I've been very happy to play Vampire the Masquerade with this group. They write a lot of backstory. We write so many things about our characters. I'm just like, poor GM.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah. Me personally, like, I think the hard part for finding a group these days is that, you in the indie sphere, it's really hard to find a group of people that want to try a game. I feel, as a designer, also a thing about how it's like very difficult to find people to playtest. It is the longest, most difficult thing that all designers go through, which is, I can't get anybody to try my game. I can't play this. So there's so many circles of like game designers that play with game designers, and that's difficult. And then there's those of us who can afford it, who go out to conventions and run games, because that's the other way to do it. So they're, putting up a local ad in your local game store, if you're lucky, that also works out. The biggest issue is that a lot of times most games are like a struggle to get off the ground. Like, if you can get a group, great. If you can get a group to play consistently, even better. If you can get a group that will play and be into it, that's also hard too. Like, that's not you might think like, oh, we're just all gonna play. Like, trust me, there's a lot of people that kind of like phone it in on games. Like, they'll just be like, cool, what do I now roll? Like, they'll sit there for like 2 hours and not say anything and go, okay, do I roll something?
Yeah, and maybe those people are new, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and maybe they're just not into the system, because that's also the hard part. Like, some game systems just don't match for some people. Like, there are game systems I don't play well in. I don't do well. Like, I play as a seasoned veteran who plays multi systems. I am a great player to have on the table, because I can play multiple systems, but there's clear like some games that if you see me playing, like, I still play at the level that's really great for your table, but not at my best. And you can very well tell like what's my best, and you can very well tell what's like me kind of just going, cool, I'm just kind of effing around.
Right. Which I think is another, kind of like we said earlier, that's another major key part of finding a group. This is a good rule of thumb. This is something I've actually started considering a lot, is like, if I'm gonna introduce a system to a bunch of people who have, 1, never heard it, and 2, never played it, because I'm the one that suggested it, the responsibility falls on me to come up with a way to teach them, come up with ways to make it easier to play for them, provide them with materials. Luckily with Troika, he's about to talk about Troika, of course he is. Luckily with Troika, a lot of like the game is actually quite simple, and like I already found like a quick cheat sheet on it, and I went through and kind of read it, and I'm like, this could be a little clearer, so I went and like re-edited some of it, and I put it back up, and I was like, hey, here's some quick edits I made for clarity. And the person who actually wrote it up saw it and went, hey, that's actually a little bit better than what I had. Do you mind if I just post this up instead? And I was like, absolutely. So I had that printed out, and I actually got a printer for free from someone I was working for. And then on the back side, I put the character creation rules. So you have essentially the SRD for the game on one side of this pager I handed out, and then character creation on the other.
Yeah.
And then I just sent everyone the PDF for the book, and then we like making a character was super easy, and we just kind of walked everybody through it, and then like I explained like 1 or 2 house rules, and then the game took off really quick. But again, just to kind of like my meandering point here was just if you're like, hey, let's play a game, and everyone says okay, but a lot of them are like, hey, I've never played, the responsibility is on you, I feel, to teach that game.
Yeah. And as a GM, like a lot of what we're doing when we're introducing new systems to players who've never tried it before is a lot of like it's a sales gig pretty much. It's like I have to make this as fun as possible, as introductory as possible, but not baby enough. Like you can't like make players feel like they're being babied, because like that doesn't make them feel good that you're talking almost down to them about like a game.
So that's top down too.
Yeah, and that's what but sometimes you kind of can't be too simple about how you're introducing it, because like it can come off as being like condescending. Like
which is why
okay, what you need to do is you need to roll this dice.
Now this is a dice, it's made out of plastic, which is why I'm really happy that a lot of games are starting to introduce the starter adventure in the back of the book, or like even Dungeons and Dragons. Like you could just go to Target and get a starter box.
Yeah.
And it has enough for 4 players.
Yeah, I myself do not like playing the starter adventure because I just don't have the time to read somebody else's lore.
Right, like which is fine. That's the same as skipping the tutorial, I guess.
Yeah, but I always skip the tutorial. I always.
It's still a good idea, but like you know, the fact of the matter is that it's on you to make sure that everybody is on the same page and is aware of like the mechanics that they're capable of, and knowing how it works. And if you do a good job, generally the response is going to be a lot of like your whole player base being like, wow, this is really fun and I enjoyed this. When can we play again? Which is that magic question you're always going to want to hear, and that's how you know you're doing it right, is like, hey, when are we next getting together?
Yeah. And that's sort of like the hopeful goal. And the hopeful goal is that out of those, I don't know, 6 people that showed up on the first run, that 4 show up on the next one, and that same 4 become your Lord of the Rings. Like that, man, there's my Legolas, there's my
your Gimli, there's your, I don't know,
there's my Frodo.
I was gonna say white bearded guy,
Gandalf. Great. Now we have our group. We're good to go. But there's some tips and tricks, like as GMs, like what Jordan says, the making very easy to build accessible characters. I know some people like, oh, well, I'll write a pre-gen, and that's what I'll do. I'll make pre-gen characters for them. Give the players some room to personalize pre-gens.
Yeah, don't put a name on there.
Don't put a name on there. Don't put anything on there. Just be like, here's the stats for a character. This character can be a lot of things, so make what you want of the story. There's nothing wrong. Like, it's clear this is a fighter type character, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't have to be Grimdar, the conquering barbarian. It could be, this is Chestnut. The barbarian that dresses up like a squirrel. Like, okay, cool. If that's what makes makes you happy, then let's play that character. Like, it doesn't have to be Grimdar the dark barbarian. It can be It can be Chestnut the happy squirrel barbarian that likes to sword fight. Great. It gives some interpretation if you're gonna create these, one-shot characters for learning.
Yeah.
And what you want in a good, I think that's something that's also discussion is when you're running a one shot to try to build a group into a system you want them to play in the future, which is you want it to have like you want to put the game on a rail.
A little, yeah. You want to kind of like direct them.
Yeah, like it's fun. Like if you're gonna run like open world system later on, that's completely fine. I don't think there's anybody else here to be like, no, don't run it up. Like no, open systems are great. Like there's nothing wrong with an open system. The only thing is it doesn't. Yeah, it just doesn't work in a one shot because there's so much uncertainty in the one shot. You have to just introduce the plot. You want to make it. You want to drive the characters to say yes to things. So it has to be something that's very, very. There has to be a sense of urgency to the situation. But it can't be to the point where you just sort of force them to do exactly as you want them to do, because then you're just sort of making them play your story, and that's not playing the game. So there has to be some ways for them to find other solutions. So there should be an urgency. There should be an introduction of status quo, which is these are the basics of like storylining. There should be a basic story, like a basic introduction of all the characters hanging out. There should be a reason for all the characters to be together. That should be inherently built into your pre-gens. Like you are all part of an organization. You are all best friends that hang out on a Saturday. Like it should be inherently ingrained, established given circumstances of like what is the world now, why we're all good, and then you break that with an event, an urgent event that sort of forces them to break away from their status quo, and then you sort of chase that event, hit a climax, solve the event, or fail the event, and then you return back to a status quo.
Yeah.
It is the fundamentals of like theatrical storytelling.
Yeah, that's why I always enjoy like my go-to one shot is like, hey, you all have been contracted to go investigate like this location. Is it like and sometimes it's just like a wizard tower or like an old fort or something, and it's like, what's happening there? Like, is it haunted? Is it goblins? Like, something like that. Like, and then generally they'll find some either big clue or like a MacGuffin, and then from there it's just like, do y'all want to continue, or do you just like you come back to the person who hired you and like, yeah, we found this, here you go, give us the money, bye. Like, I don't know what they're gonna do.
Yeah. The trope of go investigate this bad thing that's happening. It's important to give like a strong enough reason to do it, other than, well, you all are curious.
Like get them paid. Like, oh, why do they need to be paid?
We'll make money important. Like,
yeah, like we need food.
Yeah. If you say this is your job, they're gonna be like, okay, cool, that's understandable. If you say that this is a hobby, then it's gonna be like, well, I don't know if I really want to do something super dangerous that's gonna kill me. So you have to give them stakes. Stakes are very important, and like you're literally trying to sell them on a system. So like if you're trying to build groups, like one shots are great ways to introduce people to systems. One shots are a great way to get a feel of people and players, and to like it's a lot of people will like play a number of one shots, experimenting with different combinations of individuals until they find a good combination of individuals that really works well together. And what you do as GM is you go, cool, I like this group of 4 right here. Let's see if we can make this into a campaign. And then you introduce it as like a, well, just come in and like we'll run the campaign, and then you kind of think, well, maybe, and then just plan for a 4-story arc. It's like a really good number as a 4-story arc. That's a month of games, or it's if it's a bi-weekly game, then it's 2 months of games. But in essence, it's a month of games, and if the arc works really well, then you've hooked them, and then you can start running a longer campaign. But a lot of the things that you're looking out for when you're building this sort of group is do the players mesh, do styles mesh, do the schedules mesh. If one player is constantly like, I schedule is always up in the air and I don't know if I can be consistent, that's not the player you really want in your group. Because like, if they're always going to be having schedule conflicts, it's going to frustrate other players because they will have like, well, we were good Tuesday, and this person's like, well, I'm good Tuesday, but some days, most weeks, I don't know, and I can never really hammer my schedule, and I'm like, that's cool, that player's good for one shots, and it's not that you don't want to play with that player, but you have to try to be like consistent with all players so that everybody can go.
And like that, you know, like there's enough jokes and memes about like, you know, finding a good day for everybody, and like that's, you know, for all the ills and like the weird things people like and hang-ups that people have on the internet about playing RPGs, like, oh, there needs to be X in this game, there needs to be Y. You know, like, I don't want politics, which is a red flag that we'll get into at some point.
Probably the next episode.
Probably the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
The most like biggest hurdle for any RPG group is always going to be time.
Yeah.
Like that's normal. Like, so if you're watching this and you're new to GMing and for some reason, you know, you find yourself increasingly frustrated with like, oh, but no one's schedule lines up, like, this is something everyone deals with.
Yeah. And that's the thing you kind of have to be more aware of as a GM and how you choose and you sort of curate. And you don't want to say it this way, but you have to curate your circle of like your game players, because like, yes, you want to play with your best friend. I 100% understand that you want to play with your best friend, but your best friend has a kid, and your best friend has a job, and your best friend has these obligations to, I don't know, maybe their church group, and their schedule is such in flux that they can never give you a dedicated day. I know you
like 2 days a month.
I know you love your best friend, but they're not. You have to be realistic about the time commitments. Like what we have here is a game that takes time, and a lot of this really does stem from a GM having to take a bold, not really a bold approach, but you have to take an approach that says, look, we have to be very respectful about people's time, because the one thing that's always frustrated me as a player is when people don't respect my time. It takes a lot of effort for me to schedule 2-hour blocks or 4-hour blocks in any part of my week. But once I dedicate 4 hours to that thing, I'm doing it. Like, I am not, like, but, and I will not,
people have moved their lives around to sit down with some friends, have some snacks, and pretend to be a wizard elf.
Yeah. I have stated bluntly and profusely that I am not available. I'm not available on Thursday nights, and I have, and if anybody asks me, like, I'm sorry, I have a commitment, and I have a 100% commitment on Thursday nights. Like, unless it is a serious work thing, like it's a work thing that I cannot get out of, unless it is like a family obligation that I cannot get out of, my Thursdays are 100% booked for my Vampire the 5th edition group. And I've been playing with them, and I dedicate my time to that. Yep. And they deserve that respect that I will give them. Like, if I wasn't able to commit to that group, and if I was going to start having a fluctuating schedule, then I would have been like, hey, I got a duck. I'm sorry.
The main problem also with like being an adult and having an adult job and trying to schedule game day is that the weekend is a premium. Like, socially and in a corporate world, like, the corporate world wants you to spend your weekend working for them. And so that's why whenever you're like, hey, I can't come in Saturday, I have a commitment, they go, ooh, but you're really hurting the team. That's not my problem. Like, cool, I'm off. Like, I'm not coming in. That's my free time. This is not my anti-work rant, but you know.
But that's also the thing. Is like, if you're running a game that those are the things you have to be aware, and you have to have serious discussions about scheduling with your players.
Yeah.
If a person can't commit to your game, you should have a sit down and talk with every single person and just be like, can you do it? And if they're like, yeah, I can definitely dedicate to a campaign, great. Now you have a group. But you have to be very if you want a group to work, this is where you start off. You have to do it from the get. You can't be like, oh, scheduling is super serious after 7 weeks of playing together. And people being flaking and not showing up, and then you getting frustrated. You should have been aware about this from the beginning.
Sometimes it literally is just you and two other people in the group send like the fifth person a couple text messages like, hey man, are you free, free Friday, are you available, like we're trying to have dinner that night too before game, and they just don't answer.
Yeah.
Like, and if y'all are together on Friday at 7 posting like cute pictures of you like having dinner at like a Chili's or whatever, and then you go play game and that person gets mad, like, I'm like, sorry, but you kind of have to make that hard decision of like, we reached out to you a few times, you didn't answer.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the difficulty. And finding a group is finding a dedicated. If you want to find a dedicated group, you have to be very. You have to take lead. If the GM is not, I hate to say this, and I know some people are gonna be like, but the GM is the lead. The GM is the head of the social group. Like, if you're going to be the one who's gonna run the game, you're gonna have to drive it. That means you're gonna have to be the leader, and that means that you're going to have to put the schedule together. You're going to have to be the person that has to engage people and has to schedule things and has to make, and you have to be consistent. You need to be the leader in the group. You need to be the person that's going to be like, I will show up to the game and I will not flake on my players because people are expecting that from you.
Yeah, like I am bringing the materials for play. Like, I have set up a prop for them. Like, you're putting in this effort, and if some people just aren't respecting that, you are gonna have, like, kind of jumping back, you have to make that hard call of like, like, it's sometimes our silly pretend wizard games have rough patches.
And you have to be prepared to ask players to leave and ask players not to be part of your game.
Especially if they're creating an environment that makes everyone else uncomfortable.
Uncomfortability is a thing. If their schedules don't work, if they're a distraction in the game too. Like, if they just keep throwing people off and they keep like playing on their phones while they're supposed to, like, when they're not even paying attention to other players and not respecting their stories, then that's really unfortunate. And you have to, like, my GM pulled me aside recently and said, hey, I've been noticing you've been distracted and I know you've looked at your phone a couple of times, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And we had a sincere talk. Like, I just said, my character just doesn't feel like it has a purpose anymore in the game. And he was like, okay, well then maybe we should look at changing characters this time again for you. And it was like, okay, cool. And like, my GM had to come talk to me because he said, I've noticed this and it's not okay because, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And
I know that's kind of hard to avoid looking at your phone because we've, at this point, a lot of people that are into the hobby grew up with having a cell phone in their pocket and glued to their hand. It's that sort of thing. And there's a lot of digital tools nowadays for games, so like, your character sheet's always on your phone, or like, maybe that's how you roll your dice, like, so you kind of have to fight that urge to be like, okay, cool, I've rolled dice and here's my thing, all right, my turn's over, and then immediately like tick back to Twitter, like,
put it back down and be in the moment with your game and your characters and your people. And that's the thing, is like, even if you're not in the scene, you should pay attention to other players in their scenes, because like, This is their moment. This is like their moment. This is like, it's not just about you. Like, just because you're not playing doesn't mean you should just disengage from the rest of the group. It's like, it's something that's really frustrating as a GM to watch a player go, I'm so into my character, and then they go, and as soon as they're not in the scene, they're like, I'm just gonna play on my phone and not listen to anybody else. And it's just like, that's so disrespectful because everyone else is listening to your character. And they're giving you feedback, and they're telling you it's amazing, and then you're just, I don't care about the other players.
So this is, we've been kind of talking a little bit about it for now, but I feel like we need to name it because we mentioned it a little bit before, and then we started talking about it. But this goes into curating your group.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we definitively will go deeper into on the next session. I think we're also going to talk about on our next session, like curating your group and trying to talk about what makes good players on a group. And we're also going to talk about, I think, the decorum on tables. What's good decorum? What's good for us to sort of like, what's good manners and ways to like, and how to correct those things. So I think we're going to have a very good GM discussion about like, because we talked about how to put together a group and how to like run a group together or whatever it is. Now let's talk about being in a group. And so we'll get into that on the next episode. I have been Gilbert S. This has been the Unnamed Game Co.
I have been Jordan T. with Zone Fighter Games.
And this has been the Unnamed Podcast. We thank you again for listening. We've been very good at keeping these at the 30-minute marker. Until next time.
Stay gold.